Hello and welcome. It is 10 o'clock in the morning. It's the 30th day of December 2022. It's about 54 degrees and raining here at Site B, and we're looking at a picture of Hello Kitty. And why, might you ask, we are looking at a picture of Hello Kitty-chan? Well, that's simple. We're about to address the single most talked about, controversial, ridiculous topic of 2022, and that is OneDnD / Wizards of the Coast mishandling of Dungeons and Dragons over the past year. No topic has been discussed more often this year and in more ways than the OSR versus OneDnD versus Wizards of the Coast versus OneDnD versus the future of our beloved hobby. It is the number one story, whether we like it or not, which means we got to talk about it. But why should I start talking about this with Hello Kitty-chan? Because I figured we should start this with something sweet and innocent and relaxing before we dive into the nightmare. So let's just take a moment to appreciate everything that is wholesome and wonderful about our Lord and Savior Hello Kitty-chan before we move over to the disaster that was OneDnD. But don't worry, we're going to be looking at very relaxing images while we discuss this, because really we're going to need them, as this is going to be a very frustrating conversation. So just take a moment to appreciate Hello Kitty-chan. And then, okay, relaxing images. All right, OneDnD, Dungeons and Dragons 2024, the 50th anniversary, 6th edition. We knew this was coming. Should not come as any surprise to anybody. We've known for a while that 2024 was the 50th anniversary of Dungeons & Dragons, and that Wizards of the Coast was going to do something to celebrate the 50th anniversary. We didn't know what. At the 2020, before the COVID Hasbro Pulse Conference, Hasbro projection, the then CEO of Hasbro told us that they had plans for the future of Dungeons & Dragons. A large part of it would be the plans of restructuring Wizards of the Coast and re-energizing the direction Wizards of the Coast was going to take Dungeons & Dragons into the future, to take it into the digital domain and away from the physical. A lot of people were upset about this decision, like it came out of nowhere. What do you mean you're taking? But no, it was announced in 2020 that they were planning on doing this. But still, we had no idea what their plans for OneDnD, Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition, 2024 Dungeons & Dragons War. We knew they were doing something. A lot of speculations was it was going to be 5.5. They were just going to re-release 5th edition with a new, upgraded, updated SRD with all the changes since 2014, so including all the new races and classes. You know, that there was going to be some big, long, year-long celebration, maybe a big year-long adventure path like the Time of Troubles way back when. Probably something with Critical Role. We didn't really know, but we just knew they were going to do something big. And then they announced OneDnD. We didn't know what OneDnD was going to be. We just knew that they had come forward and said, this is our plan for what we're going to do in 2024. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. This is the end. This is the final D&D. This is going to be the OneDnD. There's going to be no more after this. Nothing before 2014 counts, but we're going to continue to support it. Nothing we've made after 2014 really counts. We're making a brand new but not new issue because it's going to be backwards compatible. And we're calling it OneDnD because it's the final D&D. We're not going to make any more. This caused a lot of aggravation, a lot of headaches, a lot of confusion. What do you mean? And to try and explain all the nonsense about 2024 D&D, they kept rolling out Jeremy Crawford. But every time Crawford opens his mouth, it just furthers the confusion of what you were actually doing. So then they had to roll out Chris Perkins to try and correct what Jeremy Crawford was saying. So all this stuff about canon and what was legal and what was not legal, and it just perpetuated a never-ending firestorm of pro and against, and this is wrong and this is right, and you versus you versus you. And all the while, Wizards of the Coast is trying to say, no, let's all just get together. We're going to be one happy D&D. Even though it's completely backwards compatible with 5th edition, but we're not going to talk about any of the previous editions. We're still going to support them because we want that money, but we're not going to talk about them. Nothing before 2014 matters. Not that you can't use it. You can use whatever you want at your table, but as far as we're concerned in regards to what's canon for official Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, if we printed it in 2014, it's official, it's canon, it exists. If we printed it before 2014, it doesn't exist. It's not canon. Nothing we made before 2014 is canon to 5e, but we'll just remake it. And then they announced the projects for 2022 that were going to show us the future of the direction of Wizards of the Coast. And the two ones we were most excited about was Radiant Citadel and Spelljammer. How could they mess up something so simple as Radiant Citadel? It was such a simple premise. Literally, all they had to do was watch Deep Space Nine and then convert it to D&D. Literally, Radiant Citadel was Deep Space Nine. All they had to do was that. But no, they made the disaster that was Radiant Citadel, and the sales were awful. This caused a lot of anger. Oh, Wizards of the Coast, you're mishandling the IP. And even the hardcore 5e fans were struggling to find anything relevant about it or exciting about it. And after about 2 weeks, Radiant Citadel just kind of disappeared. And we were all looking forward to Spelljammer. Spelljammer, the setting that should have been the setting for 5e all along. Spelljammer, the setting that would finally give Dungeons & Dragons the system agnostic setting they'd been talking about since 2014. Spelljammer, a system that had already had years and years of product created for it from the previous editions and contributed to by multiple authors. How hard would it be for them to mess up Spelljammer? All the while, they're slowly feeding us what OneDnD is going to be. They drag out Crawford for another. Oh, this is what OneDnD is going to be. And then 2 days later, they have to drag out Perkins to correct what Crawford said. Then the firings came. The head of Wizards of the Coast, gone. Replaced by a new head of Wizards of the Coast, a Microsoft person. The head of Dungeons & Dragons, gone. Replaced by a new head of Dungeons & Dragons, a Microsoft person. The head of, I don't even remember, art, I think it was, or storytelling, gone. Replaced by another Microsoft person. A help wanted ad goes up. And wanted, creative director for Dungeons & Dragons. But wait, isn't that Jeremy Crawford's job? Isn't that Christopher Perkins' job? Are we going to replace Jeremy Crawford and or Christopher Perkins? Well, you kind of have to, because Jeremy Crawford is a media disaster. Every time Wizards of the Coast opened their mouth in 2022, it was a disaster. Didn't matter what it was they were trying to say. The way they said it was an utter disaster, furthering the divide of Wizards of the Coast fans. We had the hardcore OSR, D&D, OGL fans. We had the middle of the road fans. We had the 5e fans, and then we had the rapidly dwindling shallow end of the 5e pool. And Wizards of the Coast continued to try and appease that crowd, taking everything they said and then going and changing it. Oh, we understand you feel the portrayal of this species in Spelljammer is problematic, so we're going to change it. And of course, the response of the crowd was, no, we're still angry. And the response of the regular 5e players were, no, we don't care. The response of the middle of the road players like myself are like, I don't care. And the response of the hardcore OSR, OGL was like, how dare you keep changing Spelljammer? But even the side was starting to peter off. And most of the anti-Wizards of the Coast press was coming from the crowd that they were trying to appease. Meanwhile, we're all just like, Spelljammer is going to be it. How can you mess up Spelljammer? Literally, all you have to do is change the stats to the current 5e. But no! Spelljammer came out of the gate on fire with controversy over the presentation of this and that and the other thing. So much so they had to cease production, roll out Crawford yet again for another apology, and then have Perkins come out the day later and go, oh no, this is actually what we meant. And this is how we're going to change things going forward. Meanwhile, OneDnD, we still don't know what's going on. What are you going to do? What do you mean by backwards compatible? What do you mean? What changes you're going to make? Is it going to be 6th edition? Is it going to be 5.5? Or is it going to be new books or just expansions to what already exists? Is this going to be another Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 disaster? Or is this going to be something new and different and amazing and maybe fix the mishandling of D&D the Wizards of the Coast has done so far? Well, sadly, we'll never know, because Spelljammer came out, and any expectations we might have had for Spelljammer actually being the core role-playing target for the audience that it should have been, instead, Spelljammer was a disaster, plagued by the space monkeys. So, within 2 weeks, Wizards of the Coast, in its usual, just sort of, Spelljammer went away. We stopped talking about it. Sales were abysmal. Sales for Ready and Citadel were abysmal. Pretty much every product that came out from Wizards of the Coast this year, sales were abysmal. The quarterly reports for the end of Q3 came out. Anticipation, expectations. Hasbro had said they expected to have $1 billion plus this year, mostly because of Wizards of the Coast money. But no, instead, it's discovered that Wizards of the Coast has dropped Hasbro into a $60 million hole. $60 million less than the same amount of money they made last year. Now, that's an understandable and ridiculous expectation on Hasbro's part, that they expected it to make so much money, because all the factors that were in place to make D&D all the money it made in 2021 were no longer there. So to start 2022 with the expectation that Wizards of the Coast would make them $1 billion was sort of ridiculous on their part. It wasn't going to happen because COVID was over. But nobody expected a $60 million loss. Nobody expected the stock to drop to 40%. So the scrambling began. How are we going to fix this? How are we going to fix this? Well, there's stuff we announced before that we can finally bring to fruition. Hey, we just bought D&D Beyond. Why did we buy D&D Beyond? Why didn't we buy it years ago? Well, we're going to tell you, but not yet. Meanwhile, the first round of playtest for OneDnD comes out. It's still being called OneDnD, and they're still having all these professional gamers come on and talk about what OneDnD is and what we can expect and how they're changing. And then Chris Perkins comes out and makes the first of the plausible deniability statements, which gives us a hint of the possible direction Wizards of the Coast might be going under the leadership of these new Microsoft individuals. In his talk about the monkeys, he mentions how, we have cultural consultants. We've had them on every project, but when it came to the information on that one specific piece of Spelljammer, that was the one day that the cultural consultants didn't look on that. So it's the cultural consultants' fault that the problematic space monkeys got onto the print. Is that what you're saying? Are you denying the responsibility by sort of blaming them? Oh, how did they miss it? That was the one they didn't consult on. Going forward, and here's the plausible deniability, when we hire these new creative cultural consultants, they're going to respond and have to talk to a head of cultural consultants, Microsoft person. They're all going to have to agree what is and isn't insulting before it ever sees print. But it's not our fault if something that offends you makes it to the market, because obviously that was something they missed. It's their fault. We'll make an errata that you'll have to pay for, and we won't hire those individuals ever again. Not that we ever told you their names, so obviously we can keep hiring them because we're never telling you their names. And of course, how do they compensate for never telling their names? news stories come out of how there's no mention of the cultural consultant in the product. You said you used a cultural consultant, but we don't see their names mentioned in the product. Oh, we forgot to list that guy's name on the product. That's not our fault. That's the other guy's fault. But yeah, that guy worked on the project. And then, of course, amongst all this, bam, the first round of OneDnD hits. The number one story of 2022. We have been rattling our sabers, lighting our torches, sharpening our pitchforks, dreading what we are going to see. And what we see is, it's not so, I don't know, it's kind of just there. It's not really great. It's not really awful. There's some changes I like. Usually I don't dislike. For the first round of a playtest, this is kind of what I expected. You know, if I didn't know this was D&D and I was just reading this as is, I would say, hey, for the first draft of a D20 5e third-party product, this isn't bad. There's some ideas in here that I like. But of course, it was D&D, and you're looking at it from the D&D lens, and you're looking at it like, look, Wizards of the Coast, you got to decide what you want this game to be, because it's still kind of a mess, because you're trying to make too many people happy, and you're never going to succeed. You know, no matter what you do, Wizards of the Coast, you can't dig yourself out of the hole you've dug yourself into. So just accept it and move on. You know, take pride in the fact that it has been a total disaster. Take pride in the fact that you totally messed up something as simple as Radiant Citadel and something as simple as Spelljammer. Yeah, we messed up. We're sorry. We're going to fix that. We understand the mistakes we made. But no, instead, as we finish the first round of playtests for OneDnD, Wizards of the Coast comes out with the results to our survey. The results to our survey are in. 5 million people are playing D&D at any given time in the world. D&D is more popular than ever. D&D has more players than ever. But of those 5 million people, only 20,000 took the first playtest survey. And the responses were pretty much, I don't love it. I don't hate it. Some of these changes are good. Some of these changes are bad. I know you keep saying it's backwards compatible, Wizards of the Coast, but I'm reading this and I'm looking at 5e, and this isn't backwards compatible. And how does Wizards of the Coast address the backwards compatible issue? How is Wizards of the Coast planning to use the year of 2023, this nice soft cushion that they have, to get us ready for 2024 6th edition? Are they going to do something like they've done in the past with a year-long adventure path that it sort of gets us ready? Are we going to see a repeat of the Time of Troubles or the Spell Plague or even Tomb of Annihilation? Are we going to get sort of, hints? No, they're releasing half a dozen new 5e products. Even though 5e is going to be obsolete by the end of 2023, they're releasing 5e products. And not a single product anybody asked for. Oh, here's a book about giants. Did anybody ask for a book about giants? No. Did it ever come up in any conversation? You know what I really need? Giants to be redefined. No, never came up. Here's a book about heists. Did anybody say, you know what I really want? A series of adventures where we rob banks, but do it in a happy, friendly way. Kind of like Ocean's 11 or Leverage. No, because you already did that, Wizards of the Coast. It was called Dragon Heist. Hey, here's a book about the Fendelvin campaign setting. Oh, is the Fendelvin campaign setting going to be the core setting for 6e? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Really, it just means all we have to do is take 3 things we've already done, repackage them, and represent it with some new art and charge you a whole bunch of money for something you probably already have. How is this backwards compatible? Because now we're looking at round 2 of the playtest, and we're all angry about these changes, and we're saying, look, this isn't backwards compatible. This is a completely new rule set. Why don't you just say it is 6th edition? No, it's not 6th edition, Wizards of the Coast says. It's 5th edition backwards compatible. All we're doing is taking everything we've worked on since 2014, mashing it together, throwing it in a blender, taking the results, and then presenting them to you in the way you want to see them. Here comes the next hint of the possible direction these new rulers of Wizards of the Coast are going to take D&D. The next plausible deniability. D&D is more popular than ever. 5 million people are playing D&D at any point in time in the world. But survey number 2, only 20,000 of those 5 million bothered to take the surveys. Of the 2 surveys, only 40,000 of the 5 million bothered to take them. That's not a big number, Wizards of the Coast. 40,000 out of 1 million? Yeah, 5 million? Yeah, that 40,000 out of 5 million. Not a big number. Okay, we see that you're upset. So what we're going to do, says Wizards of the Coast, is we're going to consult you, the players. Listen to what you, the players, have to say and make the changes you wanted us to make. What's one of the changes we're going to make? We're going to change the word race to species because all our competitors have already done that. Now, are we going to do this the sensible way and just change it quietly like Pathfinder did? No. Are we going to say at the beginning of the next round of the survey, hey, what do you think about this change? Then wait to the end of the survey to see whether people actually like the change or not? No. What does Wizards of the Coast do instead? Rolls out Jeremy Crawford once again to give a 40-minute documentary about how changing the word race to species is a good thing. Then the next day, Chris Perkins has to be rolled out and goes, look, we listened to you. We consulted you. This is what you wanted. And what's the response? The individuals that Wizards of the Coast is trying to appease rise up as one and go, how dare you, Wizards of the Coast, insult us yet again by changing race to species. Something that all your competitors had already done. But why didn't Pathfinder get any attention about the race to species change or any of the changes they made? Because they did it quickly, quietly, and nobody cared. But because Wizards of the Coast made a big deal out of it to appease this dwindling audience, all they did was further the anger. And then, as round 3 of the playtest comes to an end, and they announce the survey for round 3, that the changes to Cleric, introducing a new pointless species, they start officially calling it 6th edition. And they announce what they're going to do with the OGL, and they announce what they're going to do with the digital format for Dungeons & Dragons going forward. Now, on paper, like with all Wizards of the Coast ideas, this makes perfect sense. Everything you're saying makes sense. But instead of doing it in a creative, imaginative, and productive way, that people will go, oh, okay. You do it in the usual self-destructive way. And rather than getting people excited, you have people scared, people angry, people concerned about third-party product, people concerned about this digital marketplace Wizards of the Coast is trying to create and what it's going to mean. Some people are very excited about the digital marketplace. Most people don't care. And the rest of the people are very angry about it. I'm not going to pay for D&D. How dare you monetize D&D? How dare you do something every other video game company has already done? We're more popular than ever. We've got 5 million players at any given time. But we're not making enough money. We need to monetize D&D to make up more money. Why do we need to make up that more money? Because we just cost Hasbro $60 million. Let's not even get into the mishandling of Magic the Gathering. $1,000 for a box of cards you can't play that are worth nothing. On the off chance you might get a Black Lotus that you can't play and is worth nothing. That's a great way to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Magic the Gathering. So as the year comes to a close, the number one story of the year, as we look forward to 2024 6th edition is, oh, we're surprised you're doing this. Well, it should come as no surprise to anybody. We've been talking about it for the past 3 years. Why are you doing this? Well, we're going to explain it to you, but we're going to explain it to you in such a way that it makes less sense than it did before, and you're going to be even more freaked out. What's up with this new OGL that you're coming out with? You're changing the OGL? Why are you changing the OGL? Well, because for the past year, we tried to explain what we were going to do with this backwards compatibleness, but we couldn't do it right. We only made it worse. More and more people were confused. So what do? We say we're going to change something we technically can't change. We say we're going to try and take back something we can't take back. We say we're going to start charging you to make stuff for free. But what we really should be saying is we just want to control OneDnD in the correct way so we can make the most money. You guys cool with that? And I have a feeling if had they been honest and just explain it in a simple way, people would have been like, oh yeah, I get it. You want to make money. You're a company whose job it is to make money, and you just lost a ton of money. So yeah, I get it. And we do need an SRD, new SRD. We do need a new OGL. We do need to fix things that have changed because the creature that is the OGL has changed. But no, Wizards of the Coast and its infinite knowledge, its infinite wisdom, its infinite ability to tell us how to think, its infinite ability to take good, decent, sensible ideas and turn them into utter disasters, leaves us ending the year with the following mysteries. Hey, instead of using 2023 to ramp up the playtest, survey the players, present you with a slow progression of how we're going to change from 5e to 6c, all the things we did in the past. We're not going to do that. We're going to give you a whole bunch of new product that nobody asked for, that nobody needs, that's going to be completely obsolete. But here's our way of showing you how we're going to digitize stuff. Because every one of these products is going to have a digital counterpart. And what we're going to do is we're going to release the digital counterpart first, and then the physical counterpart a week or two later. And the quality of the physical counterpart isn't going to be that good, because we really want you to buy the super special deluxe editions. And we know, based upon Dragonlance, that no matter what we do, you're going to find something wrong with it. But that's okay, because we have already placed in 2 plausible deniabilities. 1, well, we have these creative consultants, but you know what? That was the day the creative consultant missed that bit. We're sorry you're insulted by the fish in Dragonlance. We're sorry you're upset about some artwork in Tyranny of the Dragons or the use of a word. That just somehow it got missed. And hey, we consulted you, the public. We gave you what you asked for. You asked us to change race. So we did. So if you're upset, that's on you. 2, hey, we're going to take Dungeons & Dragons and make it digital. We already bought D&D Beyond. We're planning on making a virtual tabletop, even though nobody's seen it. We've been talking about this since the year 2020. It should come as no surprise. We kind of have to. Why? Because it's cheaper. It's more cost effective. Paper is at a rarity. It's costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars to get stuff shipped from China to here. And China might get wrapped up into a war any second. Wouldn't it be just much easier for us to just digitize stuff and put it on the comptometer where everybody can have access to it for a one-time fee or even a monthly fee? Yeah, that would make sense. Is that what you're going to do? No, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to try and find every single solitary possible way we can monetize the digital format. Why? Well, because it works for Minecraft, and it works for World of Warcraft, and it works for EverQuest, and it works for, Pugs, and it works for Fortnite. People spend millions of dollars a year for digital hats. Grinding Gear Games made $30,000 in 1 year simply off digital commerce. This will work for D&D, right? This is what people want. They want to pay for every single solitary aspect. They want to pay to make sure their digital character in the digital version of digital D&D has that digital hat, right? That's what people want. And most people are going, yeah, no, really, I don't want that. And what's going on with the OGL? hey, we're going to change the OGL. Why are we going to change the OGL? Because we want people to understand that the third-party creators can still make stuff for D&D. As long as it's stuff we 100% approve of, we have complete control of, and it's only can put on OneDnD, which we're now officially calling 6th edition. So that's what we're going to do in 2023. We're going to give you a whole bunch of product you don't want. We're going to show you how we're digitizing things. Anything you complain about, we can just say, oh, well, we gave you what you asked for. Isn't that what you wanted? Don't worry. We'll change it and charge you again. The OGL, oh, it's fine. You can still make stuff for Mutants and Masterminds. You can still make stuff for 5e because we're focusing on 6e now, which isn't backwards compatible. It's a whole new edition. 5e, well, we don't care about 5e anymore. We know we're going to still make money off of it. We know people are still going to make stuff for 1st edition, 2nd edition, 3rd edition, 4th edition, 5th edition. So we're not going to support it, but we sure as hell aren't going to turn down the money because even those pennies equal dollars. And as long as we've got GM's Guild, which, we never talk about, and Drive Through and Lulu and hundreds of people making third-party 5e project every day, yeah, we're not going to support it, but we're not going to say no. Instead, we're going to make a brand new OGL so you can argue about it and be scared for 2023. We want you to be scared that we're going to take your toys away, that we're going to stop you from being able to produce stuff for the OGL when we make this OGL in 2023. Now, obviously, that's completely wrong. We can't, because something far more powerful than us, called the Department of Copyrights in the U.S. Constitution, says we can't, but we're going to try. But what we really want is for you to make stuff for 6th edition Dungeons and Dragons, to put it on D&D Beyond, so that we can have complete control over it. Does that mean people like Goodman Games can't make stuff for OneDnD and sell it independently? Technically, no. They can still try, and we might go after them. But we want you to understand, after we spent so much time getting you all scared, that there's nothing to be scared of. We can't take the OGL away from you. And we know you're all concerned about digital D&D, but don't worry. We're still going to make the physical stuff. It's just going to be the super expensive physical stuff. It's 6th edition, guys. I know we said it wasn't. I know we said it was going to be backwards compatible, but it's 6th edition. And what are we going to do during 2023? Well, we're going to continue to remain controversial because that gets idiots like the OG GM to talk about us. And as long as people are talking about Wizards of the Coast, it's in your head. And as long as it's in your head, you might buy some of our stuff, or somebody might hear you talk about it and buy some of our stuff. So really, how are we losing? Because we realize now that we are a company whose job it is to make Hasbro money. And we've just lost 3 major players, and we're about to lose a 4th because we cost Hasbro money, because we got involved in the political nonsense of 2020 to 2022. But we've got new leadership, and we're going to start all new controversies so you can keep talking about us. Why we can take Dungeons and Dragons from what it was into the new digital. We're going to have complete control of it and continue to mishandle it. Meanwhile, as our story comes to an end, sitting behind all this is Hasbro, the company that owns Wizards of the Coast, the company that owns Dungeons and Dragons, the company that says, hey, you need us, Wizards of the Coast. We don't need you. Sitting behind all this is the other story, the secret story, the story that started in 2020 that everybody seems to be ignoring. We're restructuring Wizards of the Coast. We're restructuring how we present the product. We want the product to be a brand. We're a toy company. We make money off of D&D, the sweatshirt. We don't make jack off of D&D, the book. Look how Wizards of the Coast is mishandling our product. Look how people are upset about something we said we were going to do, 2 years ago. We've restructured Wizards of the Coast. We moved them to a new office. We got rid of an entire entertainment division and replaced it with a brand new one. We've replaced major Wizards of the Coast figureheads with brand new former Microsoft employees who don't know the first thing about Dungeons and Dragons, but they sure as hell know a lot about running a digital marketplace and merchandising an IP. And we're giving you the rope, Wizards of the Coast. We're letting you throw whatever idea you want against the wall, no matter how ridiculous it is. We're letting you embrace the controversy so we don't have to. We, Hasbro, are going to just sit in the back and say, basically, this is your last chance, okay? We've already restructured you. We've already replaced several members. We've already moved you to a new office. We're already using our name in the advertising instead of your name. Hasbro presents Dungeons & Dragons Honor Amongst Thieves. Hasbro presents the 50th anniversary Dungeons & Dragons Lego. Hasbro presents Magic the Gathering 30th anniversary. Now, maybe you succeed, Wizards of the Coast, in 2023, 2024. Maybe you make back the $1 billion you just cost us, and we leave well enough alone. You're a good figurehead. When things go wrong, we don't get blamed. You get blamed. And now we have the plausible deniability in place. Oh, the creative consultant missed that one. Oh, we gave you what you wanted. But if you fail, Wizards of the Coast, well, 2023 is a good cushion year to see what our options are. We're already farmed out a lot of stuff to other third-party people. Look at what we did with G.I. Joe, Power Rangers, Transformers, and My Little Pony. Wizards of the Coast making those? No, another company is making those. Look what we did with all our board games. Wizards of the Coast making those? No, another company is making those. Look what we did with Magic the Gathering cards. A brand new company is producing them because the previous company had a whole bunch of disasters. Look who are we doing with the entertainment division. We already got rid of it. And we're replacing it with a brand new one. Look what happened with the D&D TV series. It got scrapped. So if you succeed, Wizards of the Coast, we're fine. But if you fail, well, 2023 gives us a lot of time to look at options for the future of Dungeons & Dragons. And with a 6th edition coming out in 2024, that gives us another door to go, hey, you know what? For 6th edition, maybe it's time for somebody else to take a chance with running the show. Because you can say what you want positively, Wizards of the Coast, this year. You can say what you want negatively, Wizards of the Coast, this year. You can agree with me that every choice Wizards of the Coast made this year makes sense, even though the way they did it was absolutely stupid. Or you can disagree with me. You can hate them. You can love them. You can not care. You can know that no matter what, I'm probably going to talk about them at least one day a week all of next year. But I don't think there's any argument that Wizards of the Coast has mishandled Magic the Gathering this year and truly dropped the ball. I mean, Radiant Citadel literally wrote itself, dropped the ball. Spelljammer literally wrote itself. No work necessary. All you had to do was change the stats. Drop the ball. Even Strixhaven could have been good. Candlekeep could have been good. Ghosts of Saltmarsh. Actually, Ghosts of Saltmarsh was pretty good. But you dropped the ball. And that was the beginning of the end when we saw the disaster that was Radiant Citadel. When we saw Wizards of the Coast kowtowing to these people like Stephanie Connie Chang or whatever her name is. And then finding out that no matter what they did, people still were angry at them. So the writing's on the wall. And 2023 is a good chance for Wizards of the Coast to either toss a Hail Mary and come out ahead and go, hey, we made it through. We're fine. D&D is okay. Let's just forget all this nonsense and move forward. Or it's a big chance for Wizards of the Coast to go, blum, 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 and Hasbro to go, well, you know, maybe you need a rest. Okay. Well, you just take a year off. We'll handle 6th edition in 2024. Okay. Either way, I don't think we can disagree on the mishandling of the product for this year. Sales are abysmal. Popularity is abysmal. 5 million players, only 40,000 bothered to take the survey, and the general response was, meh, it's okay. It's not great. So that was the story of the year. Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, the tabletop role-playing game population, and the mishandling of what should have been very simple steps. Changing the OGL, going digital, playtesting 6E, making content that would have been easy to be made and produce, but instead they made every single solitary marketing disaster that they possibly could. And we'll never really understand why, other than the general belief that they were trying to appease a fan base that doesn't care about what they do. Now they have a year to try and either fix this problem or make the problem worse. Either way, Hasbro, who owns Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons & Dragons, not the other way around, let me remind you again, is sitting there going, okay, this is your last chance. Now another relaxing image before we bring this to an end. All right, take a deep breath. Appreciate this sunset. And remind yourself at the end of the day, nothing Wizards of the Coast does matters. It's a silly little game about elves with sticks fighting monsters. It's only when we forget that all this nonsense starts and we start being angry at each other and attacking each other and insulting each other. So let's take a note from Hello Kitty and just remind ourselves that it's a silly little game about elves with sticks fighting monsters. And no matter what 2023 brings us for 6th edition, at least we'll have something to talk about. I am the OGGM, and that was the tabletop role-playing game #1 story of the year. Tune in tomorrow for New Year's Eve when we're probably just going to play Minecraft because I don't want to talk about D&D tomorrow. Till next time, remember, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Help me hit 1 billion subs by the end of 2023. And if you're looking for a great way to support the OGGM adventures, I have tons of merch available, including now on Drive-Thru RPG. So, yeah, there we go. That's the year in review, the #1 story. What do you think? What are your thoughts on OneDnD/OGL/digital D&D/ now officially 6th edition? Suck it, they're officially calling it 6th edition. Let me know. Thank you, Hello Kitty, for being my co-pilot. I'll talk to you later. Get off my land.